A couple of new camera and navigation options have been added to the interface, which are really nice. The first one we're going to take a look at is the ability to constrain the camera while panning to the local X and Y axes for the camera, which would be side to side and up and down. Now, normally you would do this in the camera control center. You can move the camera up and down or left and right. Well, now what we can do is hold down Control and Shift and right click, and then we can pan the camera and constrain it to the X and Y axis, the local X and Y, because within the C and the Z by default is up and down, but for the camera Z is actually the depth and the distance. So that's now available directly within the interface, which is really nice. You can change the keyboard shortcut for that. If you go to File, Options, and under Operations, scroll all the way down to the Triggers section, and under Translate Camera Constrained To, you can set your keyboard shortcut there. There are a few hotspots for this in order to trigger either left or right or up or down. If you're planning on moving the camera up and down, you're going to want to stay within these regions here in order for that to work. And then side to side is pretty much just about everywhere else around those two areas. So even if we come up to the top here in the corner, when we click on it, it's really going to move us side to side. So in order to go up and down, we need to stick to those regions that I just drew out for you. Managing cameras has also gotten a lot easier. What we can now do is copy and paste cameras. So if I'm just going to select the main camera, hit copy and paste, and now we have a duplicate. We can paste a few more in, and then we could switch to those cameras. Before we used to have to use the little icon over on the right to store the camera. What we can also do now is select a camera and just hit the delete key in order to remove it. And that way we don't have to go to the camera manager in order to modify cameras, delete them, which is really nice. If we go ahead and switch over to the perspective view, a couple of new options have been added for the perspective view. One of them being that we can now take selected objects, depending on how many you have, encompass a certain amount of the scene. What we can now do is frame those selected objects. So if we go up to the top, we can right click, and then it'll kind of frame it in the view. If you have a 3D connection, Space Navigator mouse, the frame object button is basically the same thing. In the same way to frame objects, except now it's available for everybody. Another thing that's been added for the perspective view is if you end up finding an area of the scene, or you frame it within the perspective view and you want to create a camera, you can go to Display and create from perspective camera. So now we have a camera created from the perspective view camera. So we can switch over to the main camera view, and we can see that a new camera has been created from that perspective, which is really nice. And the last thing we're going to take a look at involves the render stack. If you go to File and Options, and under General Preferences, you will find the Render Stack options. And there are two new options for disabling the stacking for render areas you draw out, and also disabling stacking for preview renders. So if I go ahead and set this up to render a preview, we'll see a new box on the right shows the last render, and this won't be saved to the render stack. It will remain separate. If you do decide you want to move it over to the stack, you can push this button on the lower right to move it to the stack. Also, there are new just delete icons added for each image within the stack, so you can just click on it and delete it very quickly. And I do just want to make a quick note for Xtreme users. Now within the host application, all the cameras that are available within the view scene will be available within your host application. So you're not restricted to just whatever the active camera was when you left the standalone scene. So that's a nice added bonus.